Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Lurid Lore. I will say before officially starting this episode that you are definitely in for a treat. I have three stories I'm going to share with you tonight. While it may not seem like a lot, they are very good, very detailed. I'm going to save the spookiest one for last just because it's intense, and then you'll even be able to give yourself some time to kind of decide if you really want to get into it. Like I said, this story that I'm going to share with you at the end of this episode is honestly one of the most just harrowing tales I think I've ever read, and the fact that somebody went through that is just awful, and I'm glad that this person is recovered from said experience, but I can't wait to show you it. So let's get started. Also, quick note, I am reading from like a script, so to speak, so bear with me. This is my first time doing this, and hopefully everything turns out okay. But my first story of the night comes from Wendy. She's actually a relative of mine, someone who I've been very close to, and she was gracious enough to give us a story. Anyway, let's get into it. So, like I said, this is from Wendy. Wendy says, "We had driven straight through Illinois to Pennsylvania to get there and hopefully say goodbye." This is in reference to her mother-in-law passing, on the verge of passing. But unfortunately, as fast and hard as we drove, we didn't make it in time. The entire family was meeting at his parents' house, and there was not a lot of sleeping room available for so many of us, so Jim and I ended up sleeping in his mom's room. We turned on the ceiling fan and went to bed. Finding it hard to sleep in a strange bed and place, I woke up many times, tossing and turning. I remember being in a not so deep sleep and being very annoyed by a chain kind of swinging in the air and tapping what I assumed was the light bulb. I wanted to get up and turn it off, but my body wouldn't let me move. Now, I know I was extremely tired from the long drive, but it was still strange. I couldn't get myself to get up and turn it off. It was dark in the room, but when I opened my eyes, at one point, I swear, I saw this gargoyle-like thing looking down at me from the ceiling. I slammed my eyes shut and never opened them again until morning. When I woke, I was telling Jim about what I thought I saw and heard all night, and he laughed at me. I probably would have too, given the circumstances. Then I looked up at the light and the fan and noticed there was no chain attached from it. I knew I heard the chain because it drove me nuts all night. That's crazy, the fact that she had heard this chain that was just driving her nuts all night long, only to wake up to realize that there was nothing there. But I'm glad that wasn't me. I would have, I don't know what I would have done. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of my sleep paralysis story that I shared in our first episode, except thankfully I didn't see anything, so good job for being brave. This next story comes to us from another very important person in my life, so I will get it started. So, she says, "I've been meaning to send you this email for a few days, but truth be told, I've been spending a lot of time this week in the house that I'm going to speak on. I really didn't want to go there mentally. The house my sister and I grew up in had a lot of weird vibes in it, to the point where I refused to sleep in my own bedroom for a solid 2 years and would run in and out if I needed anything. It started when my sister and I upgraded to having our own rooms. They were neighboring rooms separated by a connecting closet you could walk all the way through to the other room. When we first started staying in our respective bedrooms, we would wake up to the sound of knocking inside the closet. For a little while, we just assumed it was each other playing pranks. Until one day, my sister got fed up with the incessant knocking late at night and came in my room to say something to me. Except when she came into my room, I was clearly fast asleep and had been for quite some time. So she went back to her room and tried to make sense of it before she fell asleep. The next morning, she asked me about it, and I had no idea what she was talking about. In fact, I thought it had been her doing the same thing to me. So we finally worked up the nerve to explore and try to, again, make sense of it. At the time, I had been in 6th grade, while my sister was a freshman. So in my mind did not directly go to anything paranormal. I didn't really believe in that stuff and hadn't really been exposed to the idea of it. While in the closet, we came upon a handprint, stained into the paint. Based solely on the color, it being a muddy, red tinted brown, our first thought went straight to dried blood. Now, I will not sit here and tell you for certain that that is what the handprint was made of, but I would not claim falsehood if someone tried to tell me it was. While this discovery freaked us out immensely, it gets weirder. The same handprint has been painted over many times, and it still always seems to come through. Within the past 5 years or so, my grandparents had moved back into the house and have done a lot of renovations, including knocking down the walls, putting up new ones, and even changing that closet. And with that change, the handprint was covered by some wooden planks. Do I find it a coincidence that the entire energy of that house has changed with the newest renovations? No, I cannot say that I do. But before we close this chapter, I have one more story relating to me refusing to sleep in my own bedroom and your own experience with seeing a shadow person. It was the night that my nanny, my father's mother, had passed. I woke up randomly very early in the morning. I was sleeping on the couch in the living room, and I had a sick feeling in my stomach. I remember waking up feeling alarmed. That could be because a few moments had passed and my eyes had just adjusted on a shadow figure passing through the living room into my sister's room. It did not look at me and move swiftly like it had a mission. It was only a few seconds later that I heard a phone in the kitchen start ringing. I immediately somehow knew what this phone call had been about. My nanny had been struggling with health issues for a very long time, and I knew that she had passed. I didn't know how I knew, I just knew. My dad answered the phone, and from his reaction, I knew exactly as I thought. The next day, I confirmed with my sister about what I had seen, and she had told me that she experienced the same thing. Now, I don't know what we saw or if it was any way related. I just find it very hard to believe it could not be. And that comes to us from Hailey. She also said, P.S. I'm excited to hear your new episode. The first one was great and had me hooked. Well, thank you so much, Hailey. That is my cousin, if I didn't already say so. So I'm really happy that she contributed to our second episode. Like I said, most of these stories are probably going to be from friends and family of mine. At least these first two are. But, I mean, it's just nice that I have some sort of support in this, knowing that it was just like a complete, almost like random decision. But thanks, everybody who did contribute and who has made this, who at least gave me content for a second episode. I mean, for all I know, this might be the last episode if I don't get any content. But I just really appreciate everybody listening and contributing and sharing and doing whatever they can to get me listeners. Like I said, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. So without further ado, let's get to this last story. I guess some trigger warnings, perhaps. Suicide is definitely in there, possession, and demons. So if you have an issue with any of those things, I suggest tuning out now. But this one, I've been emailing with this person back and forth for about a week, and I don't know this person, but I can just tell you that she is in a better place mentally. So we, very thankful for that fact absolutely. You know, unfortunately, these types of things really do take a hold of you, and I've never experienced it firsthand, and I cannot imagine what it would be like to experience this. But let's move on to this final story. Another thing going into this, I cannot make this up. This is happening this second as I'm recording. So I like to do show notes, so I have something to kind of go off to kind of keep me on track. And then I can kind of like format things to kind of flow a little bit better. I kid you not, I am missing one of the pages that I printed out from the story that I'm about to tell you. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm not trying to cause more fear into people, but I swear to God, I have 3 of the 4 pages. The fourth page, the fourth page of which has a majority of the information regarding this story. So, that being said, I am going to have to read it off of my email, so it might sound a little weirder, but oh my gosh, as if to add to the just, the horror of this story. I don't have all of the pages. My printer wasn't out of ink, nothing. I only have 3 pages. I just thought that I should share that with you because this is insane. So, again, bear with me. I am reading this off of my phone rather than off of a sheet of paper, which it doesn't really matter. But like I said, I do like to do my show notes, kind of reformat things and kind of like flow a little bit easier. So, again, this is only episode 2, so it will progressively get better, I promise you. Anyway, our final story of the night, is from a listener who wishes to go by the name of Blue. Anyway, so let's get started. Years ago, I encountered Bubby, or as most know him, Beelzebub. Yes, that Beelzebub. It was an immediate connection. I had turned to the sins of life and found his warm embrace comforting. He helped guide me to make the most profitable decisions of my life. The way Bubby communicated was predominantly telepathically, with some appearances and physical motivations. I knew the sound of his voice in both a quiet and noisy room. Sometimes he would show up in a dream or standing in a position in front of me. Other times he would legitimately use me as a tool and manipulate my hands to type or select an item. Bubby was tall, leathery fellow who would make most people vomit just looking at him. What I perceived as kind was anything but. Starting around 11, I began to enjoy the darker side of life. Around then, he made gentle appearances and started me with little white lies. By 14, I was dealing drugs and making a good deal of money. I was having premarital sex and I had become popular. Out of nowhere, one day I felt the sudden urge to take my own life. I laughed and laughed as I swallowed pills and alcohol. I do not feel it was of my own volition that I pierced my skin with safety pins and left them inside. It took a team of people to tame me after that, but I was never the same. It started on a steady regimen of therapy and pills, and nothing took him from me. He wanted to have fun between dimensions and was enjoying it very much. Going to church churned my stomach. I became very skeptical. I had seen what Beelzebub had to offer. I can still smell his stench that would fill my nostrils while sitting in a pew, sickly but sweet. Years passed, and I seldom tried to fight him. There were deeper inner conflicts. Professionals began to analyze my nightmares as they became prophetic. I never understood why Bubby would guide me to those scenes. I could describe war zones, car crashes, lost love, many things before they ever happened. I believe he was trying to persuade them with his bait. He was, of course, responsible for the other issues happening that I depicted. Beelzebub was never far, despite me not being his only conduit. I have no memories of certain days spent in pain, rage, and defiance. My addiction to pills and wine took my own wedding day from my mind. His plan would uncoil later. At 19, I was taking a nap and awoke to an almost loving feeling. His love was like being buried alive with a straw to breathe through. It was terrible, but I thought, I'll live. After I woke, I was met with the most terrible news of betrayal. I grabbed my scissors and ran to the bathroom to take my life again. It felt right, good. He guided the tool along my wrist. I was saved and ran. I shook for days. I wanted no part in his sick games anymore. I went to church multiple times a week. Blackouts became more frequent despite never having done this before and being clean and sober. I felt my body beginning to decay. I could not stay away from temptations. One night, my husband and I got very drunk. I remember being very demanding. However, I was not up to bat. Bubby was trying to take my husband as well. He played on his every fantasy. What started as gentle became full beating of him. Beelzebub yowled in excitement like a cat playing with a mouse before devouring it, until my husband said, "Who are you and where is my wife?" Bubby posed as me, declaring I was there all along. My husband knew better. He accused Bubby into a corner, held us down and questioned us until I was back. I became the most lucrative thing I have ever done, selling myself online. I became so obsessed with success that I drove everyone I knew and loved away. Beelzebub loved it. I was doing nothing good for myself, and he didn't care. I became aware that he was spending more and more time in my presence. I was never alone anymore. After a weekend of drugs and bad ideas, I awoke on a Sunday and knew something was different. I could barely see. I began rambling in a different language no one had heard before. I was delivered hope where a man and woman waited to perform an exorcism. Bubby was infuriated. He almost had me, and they wanted to take me. I stood in a dimly lit room, or with certain candles lit. Sage was burned all around me. Cleansed crystals made a pattern at my feet. The man, in another language, tried to pull Beelzebub from me. Bubby would never let go. I fell to the ground, paralyzed and convulsing. After hours of work, I became so feeble that they stopped. I don't remember saying I was going to wash up, but that's what the man told me I did. I went into the bathroom and grabbed my pills and went to the kitchen and got a knife and committed suicide. Or so I thought. The exorcism had done nothing but anger Bubby. Nothing was going his way, but it always had. When I came to, I was in a hospital. My father, a Christian man, pleaded with me to banish the darkness that surrounded me, to plead for the Lord's help. He knew nothing of Beelzebub, at least I had never told him, but he could see clearly standing next to me, weak and angry. After leaving the hospital, and for 2 years, Bubby laid low and wait. Imagine an angel pulling a blanket up at night, how snug you would feel. Instead, he gave me insomnia, and I felt that was kind of him. I continued with doctors and medications, and 13 pills a day never took him from me. In the past months, however, it got much worse. I became possessive of him. I grew offended if anyone spoke ill of him. I turned to Satanism. I started calling my children Beelzebub or Bubby. My father tried to call me out, but I told him it was a joke. Any attempt at bettering my physically or mentally decaying body was met by unreceptive neurons and chemical resistances. This was not my doing. Everything changed when I went on vacation with my friend. She believes in the old goddesses and was immediately nauseated standing next to me. She was familiar with the stench that filled her nose, knowing two other conduits of bubbies. She'd wasted no time explaining that she had experience in the matter and was going to help me. What happened next was hours of work. I was present at times. Other times I mentally stood by and watched as her and Bubby fought. She had gotten out her crystals and surrounded me. We meditated until I sobbed in fear and pain. She called him forth. She explained to Beelzebub he had no place in me. My body was built for me. He needed to cherish himself and leave this world. He pleaded to keep me. I was begging not to let him go. At times, his gaze turned toward the room my children were in, and my youngest peeked out of concern. The one that I most often called Bubby. My friend demanded he return his gaze to her and continued to berate. Felt as if my left eye could see the room and my right could only see her. In a voice not my own, I told her I would stay on this plane until my bidding was done. She grabbed my hands and growled that Beelzebub had a place of his own that would welcome him back, and it was time to go. I went limp for a few minutes, crying and laughing. I regained my vision, and the phantom smell of Play-Doh filled my nose. An innocent thing. I felt lighter. That night, and for every night since, I haven't taken 2 of my PTSD medications. I'm lighter. I've begun new journeys. My life is more passionate. Naturally, I stopped using the word Bubby. One night after lovemaking, when my soul was open and vulnerable, my mind wandered to an innocent street. Creeping around the corner was Beelzebub. I walked away. He demanded my return, and for the first time, I told him no, and I will keep doing that. And just another addition to this story, Blue says that she's been seeing doctors since 8 and have had psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, counselors, and more looking after her, throughout her life. She does not have bipolar, split personalities, and does not hallucinate. This was something that had no medical explanation to it. But that story, I'm so glad. Thank you, Blue, for sharing that. I can only imagine how it felt even just typing that out, but I'm glad that you're in a much, much better place now, and you seem to have gained that control that you had lost. Like I said, unfortunately, I don't really have much to elaborate with that on. I've never been through such an experience. I'm fortunate and thankful that I have not been through something as just harrowing as that. You are very strong, and like I said, I'm just so happy that you are now in a place where you have passions again and you're back to where you wanted to be. And I'm glad that he did not take any more from you than what he did. And I feel like it could have been awful, but I'm very happy that you remained strong throughout this whole entire ordeal. Anyway, on that, we conclude this episode. It's a little bit shorter than the first one, but now it's all up to you guys. Send me your stories. Remember, luridlorepodcast@gmail.com. That is where I get all those emails. And actually, guys, I'm on YouTube now. It's the same exact thing as what you hear on Spreaker, so there's not anything different except for it might be a little bit easier for some of you to listen on YouTube, but we are there. Just look up Lurid Lore like you do everywhere else. I did start an Instagram page, same, Lurid Lore, Twitter, Lurid Lore, everything, Lurid Lore, everything is Lurid Lore. But I just wanted to thank everybody who sent me stories and who has supported me. I know this is only the second episode. Like I said, I would love to be able to do more with this. I have found that I actually really enjoy doing this. Like I said in my first episode, I just needed something creative that I enjoyed doing to kind of just get those juices flowing and like not feel just so monotonous, like every day, all the same thing every time. So I definitely appreciate all of your guys's input and support and stories and sharing. Like, just thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I got a lot more listens than I thought I would, which definitely it helps out. It's definitely a confidence booster for sure. Also, I would like to state that there will not be an episode next week. I will be out of town, so hopefully the weekend after that there will be. If something happens, I'll definitely update you guys, but I will see you in the next one.